we're going to be trying to keep cool over the next couple of days, and that's put PJM in a tough spot for sure.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the American First Energy Podcast. We're coming to you today with another one of our mini episodes on the energy emergency that we're facing here in Virginia and across the PJM service territory. In our first episode, we highlighted some of the troubling announcements that PJM made earlier in the summer months about not having enough power, potentially not having enough power this summer, resulting in rolling blackouts or brownouts in the PJM service territory, which accounts for 67 million Americans. This week, we're back with a couple new updates. Just yesterday, today's June 20th, and just yesterday, PJM came out with another stark warning saying that we will increase our energy demand above their targeted thresholds as early as this coming week. PJM thought that the highest demand for energy this summer was going to be 154,000 megawatts. As early as next week, with some of the high temperatures, we could be seeing demands at 158,000 megawatts. So we're already there. We're already beating the expected trajectory for energy demand in these hot summer months, and it's only June 20th. Ben?
That's right. And it's as PJM in their press release stated, it's an all hands on deck type of situation. For all the generation sources that have been scheduled for maintenance, they have been, as of June 19th, told to come back online in 72 hours. So PJM is doing what they can to provide that supplemental generation. But like you said, there's a potential, like we had talked about in our first episode as well, that 67 million Americans might experience some form of power fluctuation in order to make sure that the grid is stable. We talked about it a little bit in our first episode, but there's this intricate balance that is necessary when you're talking about stabilizing the grid. You got to make sure that for that demand, there's that exact generation on the grid. And going into this next couple of days stretch into the middle of the next week, around June 23rd or 24th or 25th, there's that potential that these hot temperatures are going to have people turning their air conditioners on, their refrigerators working a little bit harder in the garage, fans are running. So we're going to be trying to keep cool over the next couple of days, and that's put PJM in a tough spot for sure.
It has. We talk a lot about energy development and energy supply in the abstract, but it's really starting to come to a head here where as early as next week, we might not have enough power to keep the lights on for all the people who want it. This is why bringing more power online is so important. And PJM highlighted that in their first release of the summer, stating that new energy, solar, battery storage, etc., are so important to keeping the lights on and to help us make sure that we're supplying enough energy to all the energy demand sources that we're needing. You mentioned that they are telling all of the power plants that were down for scheduled maintenance that stop your maintenance, get ready. You have to be producing as early as next week. We need every asset online as quickly as possible. PJM is also planning to take advantage of what they call contracted demand response, which is essentially 8,000 megawatts of demand that have signed up not to have power, to have their power reduced in order to meet these demands so we don't see those rolling blackouts. So they're having to ask people to consume less power. That's hardly a recipe for economic growth and prosperity if you're not able to keep your air conditioning on, if you're having to close businesses or reduce capacity. That spells disaster, and we're seeing it a lot more quickly than we were expecting.
That's right. Yeah, and it's, of course, we all know, especially living in an area that can be humid, can be hot, this heat is the norm, and we're only stepping into the first part of the summer. Of course, today, when we're recording, June 20th is the summer solstice this evening. We're going to be entering into all the fun that comes with summer, but it is unfortunate, like you note, that kind of the main solution here is effectively asking people to stop doing things in their daily lives, decreasing their energy usage. And the reality is that long interconnection queues and struggles to get new generation on the grid, whether it be opposition on the ground, et cetera, has really put us in a tough position as we enter into a pretty warm summer. Of course, we also recall last year, hurricane season adds additional threats as we move into the fall. And all of this is a complex issue that one of the first steps that we can do to address it, whether it be the summer or the fall, is add new generation. With new generation comes new upgrades to our transmission system, and it creates a safer and more reliable grid for us all. And unfortunately, we weren't doing enough. It's very clear now beforehand. But I think this is a wake-up call to all of us that we really need to be taking initiative to support more generation, especially in the PJM territory.
Yeah, and we can also look at the year-over-year differences. I mean, last year, our peak summer load was 152,000 megawatts. It's, like I mentioned, June, and we're going to blast past that, potentially 6,000 megawatts more, and it's only June. So we're seeing this growth take place year after year. It underscores that need to create new energy. It's interesting that we had the largest peak ever in PJM history was 20 years ago with 165,000 megawatts. We're not even at that level of generation right now. So we have to keep our power plants humming. We need an all of the above response to developing energy, and we need to streamline the ways to bring new energy projects online. The local permits matter, the PJM interconnection permits matter, the state environmental permits matter. We need all of this online. And I think a lot of folks are looking at these forecasts and wishing that we had produced or developed more energy over the past 6-8 months. And now we're going to have to answer for that. And Ben, a lot of folks are looking to PJM with some complaints. Of course, Virginia, on a very recurring basis, imports about 40% of its electricity. We are able to import that electricity because other states are producing more than they're consuming. The P in PJM stands for Pennsylvania. And on a regular basis, Kayla, let's toss up this map here. But right now, it looks like Pennsylvania is adding 11,000 megawatts to the grid right this second. Virginia is consuming, or their net import is 6,000 megawatts. So our energy deficit is being made up by Pennsylvania's energy surplus. And Ben, we saw some news coming out of Pennsylvania this week. Do you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but the reality is Pennsylvania generates about 25% of the power necessary to run our grid, and the numbers you just showed clearly illustrate that. And the governor there in Pennsylvania has clearly been frustrated over the last couple of months into the fall and winter of last year, talking about how it's hard to get new generation off the ground, and that Pennsylvania is looking for new options and ways to ensure that its prices remain competitive and that their consumers stay in an economically friendly environment with regards to their energy bills. And the governor has, unfortunately, due to some recent auctions and rates for the energy in PJM's grid, has potentially threatened to remove Pennsylvania from that interconnect, that group of 13 states that works hand in hand. And that would pose a great risk, of course, to a state like Virginia, potentially other states in our area that are supporting innovative growth in data centers and AI, but also new businesses, new homeowners. Without that generation, we would surely be stuck between a rock and a hard place trying to figure out where that generation would come from.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, and I didn't know this until reading it, but Pennsylvania is the largest net energy exporter state in the country. They export more energy than any other state, and really in Virginia and the rest of the PJM territory, we're the beneficiaries of that. I mean, we've mentioned this over and over again. Virginia does not produce enough energy to power its own homes and businesses, so we rely on out-of-state power producers in West Virginia and Pennsylvania most predominantly to keep those lights on. If Pennsylvania
Right.
sees fit to remove themselves from the PJM interconnection grid, we're in a really difficult place because we won't be able to power our homes and businesses with Pennsylvania energy anymore. We really rely on West Virginia, but it would spell the disaster. So when Pennsylvania threatens to leave PJM because the electricity prices are too high, just think about the downstream effects of that. That is an immediate energy emergency for most of PJM, but most notably its most power hungry state being Virginia.
That's right. And the reality is, we've heard the governor in Virginia numerous times talk about how Virginia is the number one state for new business in the United States. That is something that we as Virginians tout. We recognize the benefit of that, not just for those businesses and for the localities that are receiving a lot of that business, but for the whole state. When we're able to generate more economic opportunity, we're able to support more of our fellow Virginians with good jobs and good investments in their communities. But without energy, like we say all the time, those businesses will cease to exist. And as you were noting, the broader issue is, as Virginians, our security largely relies on our capacity to produce energy, or at the current moment, it's our capacity to import energy. But eventually, if Pennsylvania were to leave the grid, it would be up to us to figure out how are we going to power our communities, our government procedures. How are we going to ensure that we can continue going to work, we can continue going to school, and it comes down to what are we generating here at home.
Yeah. I mean, it underscores the notion that energy scarcity is affecting almost everything in our economy in a negative way. I mean, from Pennsylvania's perspective, the energy scarcity on PJM is driving up the cost of their consumers' electricity because we're purchasing it, we're paying a premium. They're having to pay similarly high prices for that rather scarce energy, even though that they're exporting more than they're producing. But it's the market, so we're all having to compete for those same electrons, and we're paying the price for it. It puts us in a really difficult situation, and I think it's underscored by Governor Shapiro's threat to leave. I mean, not too long ago, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin called for the CEO of PJM to resign and step aside because he didn't have faith in this leadership to bring more energy online quicker. Of course, a lot of this energy demand growth in Virginia and a lot of states is spurred on by data center development, which are very crucial to our everyday lives, to our cell phones, to our computers, to AI, advanced computing. Data centers are the infrastructure that make that happen. So we need those. It just so happens that they're
That's right.
very, very power hungry. And specifically, Maryland made some news this past week calling um, for some changes at PGM because they might be straddled with what they estimate is $800 million in network upgrade costs, transmission costs, in order to run more power lines to power hungry Virginia data centers. So even Maryland is upset by this process now because we're experiencing such high demand growth.
That's right. And it's an intricate system. It's complex. The solutions are going to be complex, figuring out ways to ensure that consumers and states and across the PJM region from the north or the mid Atlantic out into the Midwest, stay cost competitive and their bills stay low. It's a complex issue, but it really comes down to what Governor Shapiro was mentioning and what was mentioned tangentially in the conversation with representatives from Maryland is that we just don't have enough generation, and having to move that generation from 2 or 3 states over down to Virginia or wherever a data center may be is a difficult process. Moving electrons from one place to another is difficult. You have to, of course, move it across transmission lines. And the more that we can locally source our energy, whether it's here in Virginia or for people in Maryland or Pennsylvania or out into the Midwest, it's beneficial for not only our state, but like you said, consumers in other states so they can utilize their energy so they're not having to send it to other places. So, of course, as we always come back to, we've got to find new ways to put new electrons on the grid cost competitively, fast. Of course, we recognize that this is a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and we've got to find a way to get new electrons on the grid. And so the best, most cost effective ways to do that are what we should be pursuing for sure.
Yeah, and doing that locally. I mean, if you're producing power, if you're generating energy in the same communities that are demanding that energy, you don't have to build these extremely expensive transmission lines. You don't have to necessarily pipe in all of our electricity or a huge amount of our electricity from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and vice versa across the grid. This is why we focus so much in our day jobs about talking to communities about the benefits of creating new energy generation capacity in their own backyards, in the counties that are demanding this energy as well. I mean, in an ideal world, every Virginia county is a net energy exporter, and that would make Virginia a bit more energy independent so that we aren't subject to these wild cost swings from increasing energy costs over time, and so that we're not so susceptible to Maryland throwing a fit over transmission lines, or Pennsylvania threatening to pull out of the grid that we absolutely need them to be a part of. It's all part of that solution. We just purely need more energy, and no one is being well served by energy scarcity this summer.
Yeah, we need an abundance of energy, electrons for everybody in the country. It's only going to get warmer. We got to find a way to address those needs and support Virginians and support Americans in the process. Our national security, our energy independence is essential as we move into the 21st century and what that means for technology. We've got to get more electrons on the grid. And like you said, the best way to do that is locally.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear, we're not rooting for things to go poorly. I mean, we're certainly hoping that the last week of June goes as smoothly as possible, that we do have the energy necessary to power our air conditionings, to power our homes and businesses. But this is just pretty shocking. I mean, PJM coming out about a month later saying, actually, as early as this week, we're going to be exceeding our expected energy loads. Every single power plant has to show up, and we will throttle back the energy demand of hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses who will be receiving less power to make sure that the grid stays on more widely. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks and hopefully be able to look onto this situation with the benefit of retrospect and see how this plays out. But this summer's really shaping up to be a difficult one in terms of meeting energy demand with the limited supply that we have within PJM. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Scott.